Welcome, everyone. We just wanted to give everybody a little bit of time to join us. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this installment of our Neutral Nation programming in celebration of National Black HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. I am your moderator for the evening. My name is Jamir Tuten. I am a representative of Research with a Heart. I'm a community engagement specialist, and I am here to speak to some wonderful people about a very important topic. I'm not going to do any long drawn out bios. I'll give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. I'll just go in order of how you appear on my screen. I'm going to start with Mr. James Credle. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is James Credle. I am a decorated Vietnam War veteran, and I came to work in this issue with HIV as a member activist in the gay community. I am a former assistant dean of student at Rutgers University Newark campus, and creator of the Fireball as a response to providing safer sex messages to targeting the house communities of Greater Newark with the mothers and fathers of Greater Newark.
Amazing. Thank you for being here, James. And we're going to go over to Dr. Halkitis. Welcome. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi. Sorry about that. Perry Halkitis, how are you, everyone? Good evening on this weird, snowy, not snowy day. I am the Dean of the School of Public Health at Rutgers. More importantly, I am an HIV researcher, educator, advocate, activist who has been working in the field for about 2.5 decades. I am thrilled to be here with you tonight to talk about these ideas around Neutral Nation and to speak and have a conversation with my colleagues. So happy Thursday, everyone.
Yes, thank you for being here. And lastly, one of my favorite sheroes, that's a female who's a hero, Dr. Chris Pernell. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be here with you tonight. I am the Chief Strategic Integration and Health Equity Officer at University Hospital. Basically, what that means is that people matter to me, and that the human experience, the dignity in each human life and soul is valued, and how we actualize that, how we manifest that through healthcare and public health. It's very important for me to affirm that I am the daughter of a man who lived with HIV/AIDS and who lived triumphantly the best way that he knew how, and empowered me not long before my father passed. He passed due to COVID, to please tell his story. And if his story could impact those living with HIV status or the stigma associated with status. And that's why I love this topic tonight, that he wanted to do that. So this is a gift to my father as much as it is a gift to humanity.
Wow, thank you, thank you. And we are grateful for your father and his presence and all the work that he's done, because look at you. So thank you all for being here. I just wanted to send a special shout out to Raphael Crulo of ArtFront Galleries for helping us curate the Neutral Nation virtual art exhibit, all of the wonderful artists who have submitted work, beautiful, beautiful pieces, the spoken word pieces, the videos. It's a lot of great content over at neutralnationartshow.com. So go check that out when you have a chance. And I just wanted to explain what Neutral Nation means in case you did not know. So Neutral Nation is, no matter your status, everyone has a right to good health. And we are in this fight to combat HIV together. And it's really important to acknowledge HIV, the epidemic campaign, and the ideas around what's happening to HIV as a whole during this pandemic, and how we're going to be able to reshift the already shifted narrative back to focusing on people living with HIV and also people who are at risk of contracting HIV. So I really just want to jump right in and get started with the questions. And I just want to ask all of you how you've been coping with the mounting stress of working, because you all work, you wouldn't be here throughout this tumultuous time. We're almost at a year's anniversary. I hate to say it, but it's the reality. How have you all been? You know, Dr. Pernell, you can start.
Sure. You know, I find that I'm able to thrive because it's an intentional priority for me to find a way to thrive because of what I see and experience professionally, but also because of what I've experienced personally, right? And it's why it's so important in public health. We talk about amplifying public narratives, lived experiences, because it unleashes a chain reaction of consequence. So for me, it actually has been cathartic to talk about this surreal experience of losing my father during this pandemic. You know, we talked about how he would live out the end of his life, and this was not it. This was not it. Yeah. And so being able to affirm that in public spaces really has been a part of my healing, and also being, you know, working in a community that has been disproportionately impacted, meaning a Black and Brown community, a Black Brown majority city here in Newark, has been disproportionately impacted during this pandemic. I think it has made a lot of issues more vibrant, if I could use that word, and more glaring. And so that ability to empathize, I have one situation and scenario, but to empathize where others are in that really has been a way for me to purposefully exhale out of some of my personal experiences and inhale someone else's experience. And I love art. And so that's the last thing I will say. I use art as healing, art as meditation. Whether that's through song, or whether that's through dance, or whether that's through appreciation of someone else's art, or whether that's through talking about, you know, therapeutic art, right? Therapeutic art for mental health hygiene. So that's how I'm coping with this, the stress, and still intentionally aiming to thrive.
Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in?
I can jump in. It's such a complicated question, right? So on the one hand, I feel like, what do I have to complain about? I get to stay in my home and work and stay safe and think about this disease and think about how this disease makes things worse for people with HIV, makes things better, I don't know. But I don't have to be out there, you know, putting my life at risk every single moment of the day. And so I own that privilege that I have in my life that allows me to actually do this. I think that, you know, as somebody who has lived his entire life in the shadow of the AIDS epidemic, and I would encourage all of us to maybe take a look at that new HBO Max show, It's a Sin, which follows a group of young men coming of age in London in 1981. Which is a lot of what my last book was about, but okay, I don't know about that. They didn't give me any royalties. So anyway, I think that for me, it's like HIV, of course, is horrific and was horrific, but it also shone a light on the importance of people in healthcare and on the importance of lives of marginalized people. And I think I try to see silver linings and things. Like, I don't want to have lost 500,000 people. I think it's horrific and disgusting, and we shouldn't have to ever we should have lost no lives. But if we had to lose lives, maybe what we take out of this, once again, is an illumination or an amplification that we have to strive every single day for equity. Equity in healthcare, equity in all these aspects of our lives. Because what has the COVID pandemic, you know, when I started doing these interviews, that's my last comment, when I started doing interviews about COVID months and months and months ago, people were like, oh, brown and Black people are dying at higher rates. And I'm like, why are you shocked at this? Like, why is anyone acting like this is odd somehow? Because it didn't surprise me, because brown and Black people are experiencing health disparities at much higher rates than the white population. So I think what this epidemic has done, once again, this pandemic has done, shone a light on the faults in our society, but I also think potentially energized us again to continue the fight, both towards ending AIDS, COVID-19, but mostly and I don't, because there'll be another disease later, the ongoing disparities that exist in our society. I want to stop documenting disparities, and I want to start working every single day towards equity.
Very good.
Well, for me, it's been an opportunity to gain a little weight. I've always enjoyed cooking. Since the pandemic, I've been spending too much time in the kitchen, but that's been fun.
I'm coming over.
That's been fun. But I've also been engaged in, since I am here, I'm retired now, and I feel lucky and blessed that I don't have any major issues around finances, for instance, that keeps me sane. I don't have to worry about going out and trying to work to maintain my life and living. So again, I feel blessed about that. But I have been watching TV a lot more than I used to. And I've been really taken aback by so much of the white supremacy that exists in America. And I think it has come to the forefront of experiences where people are realizing what a deep and embedded issue in our society it remains till today. And I am, my work began talking about that as a Vietnam veteran coming back from Vietnam and experiencing the racism of being a Vietnam vet, and then going into the gay community and experiencing the racism there. So it's been a life of dealing with that issue. I come from the South. I come from the Jim Crow era of North Carolina and coming to what we call up South, which is Newark, New Jersey. And reminding myself once we got here and experienced that, is that Newark is as segregated as the little town in North Carolina that I came from.
Talk about
So all of that has come together in the experience of the pandemic, and the pain that I feel about what's going on is imagining what it's like for youth who are coming out now. And the horrific issues that they face, you know, and that pains me because I'm one who worked on the Vietnam veterans with other veterans and tried to help them through their pain. And during the working in with the house community, working on HIV and working with that pain. But that pain of the youth, I haven't found a way of working with yet. But I think we all need to think about what that means for youth coming out and what we can do to assist that effort.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. And that kind of segues a little into the next question and kind of the purpose of why we're all here having a conversation. And that is, why is it important to ensure that community members are centered in the conversation about the future of HIV? And anyone can take that.
Yeah, can I start with that? And, you know, I'm going to weave in stories from my father because he has been one of my greatest teachers as a public health practitioner. And oftentimes, because of the professional life that my father lived, he was a research scientist, just to recognize the journey and the experience of my brother here, Mr. Credle on the panel. My father too came up out of, you know, Richmond, Virginia. He graduated from his high school in 1959, and he imagined he was going north to escape the Jim Crow South, to escape the racial terror of the Jim Crow South, and to seek opportunity. And in getting to New York, where his family was, and ultimately, you know, settling in Newark, New Jersey, and, you know, he being a self-taught Black man and being able to achieve a measure of success, he felt that being open and honest and transparent about his health could threaten that. Right? because you spoke about white supremacy, because white supremacy teaches us that there is one narrative. White supremacy teaches us that there is a supreme or superior narrative. So if you don't, conform, or you don't live in a way, and I have to use this word delivery, that pays homage to that system or that construct, you feel under threat. So, here my father was this very bold, brilliant Black man who was able to achieve in research. Literally, he started at Bell Labs cutting grass, because that's the only job that was accessible to him. Self-taught, reading textbooks, working a second job at night, taking classes at the lab with professors saying, you know this stuff, how do you know it? And ultimately getting a role at the lab reserved for Ph.D. scientists, but still he couldn't openly speak about his health, right? And he helped him to go inward. So we have to give space. We have to give space for people in community to live in their truth. And in giving space for people in community to live in their truth, it's going to empower. It's going to empower more thorough, more honest, more accurate solutions. You can't solution around people who are experiencing the very thing that you're quote unquote hoping to solve or fix.
Yeah.
You have to solution in partnership. And so I think that always causes me to want to return to that, because my father had a very profound relationship with his particular provider, but he lived in the dark about his health.
I'm wondering if I could add something to the very beautiful story that Crystal just shared about her father and his provider, because I think that's has sustained so many people throughout this epidemic, that relationship. But before I do that, I want to talk about this. I want to address systemic racism, because I think, I come to this conversation as a white man, right? I come to this conversation as a white gay man. I come to this conversation fully cognizant of the fact that my success in this society is predicated in great part on the color of my skin and my ease of transitioning from a father who was an immigrant and a dishwasher in a restaurant to the dean of a school was made a lot easier, right? Because I am a white man and I'm a white gay man who passes as straight, right? And so I want to own that, because I think that's really, really, really important. I do at the same time only marginally begin to understand what it might be like to be a Black person living in our society, knowing the health issues that my community faces and being ignored. Because as a gay man, we were ignored for a very long time, right? But that's only an iota of what Black and brown folk are facing in our society. Why people's voice, so this is my way of getting to the Credle question, Jamir, which is people don't want to be unhealthy. They don't. Yet this biomedical model that we continue to impose on society just assumes that people are irresponsible and the young Black guys are just having more sex. No, they're not, and blah, blah, blah. And that people just want to be obese or they want to have a method. Like, people don't want these things, right? Life circumstances get people to these health conditions in their lives. And so what I've been fighting for really, really, loudly and passionately, I'm a Greek, so I'm really strong in my beliefs, is this notion that we have to marry the people in our communities and our populations know what they need. We just need to give them the voice and not other them and not think we know better, but work side by side with them. So a model that my colleague Leslie Cantor and I have put together looks at a modern urban public health paradigm informed by social justice and health equity that marries populations with healthcare, with public health, with industry, because let me tell you, industry knows how to do them. Like, why are we having trouble with COVID messaging? Let's just ask the people at Audible. They know how to do this, right? Like they do this all the time. And you bring people together to the table and people as equal partners. It cannot be this top-down approach. It's broken. It doesn't work. I mean, it hasn't worked and it's not going to work.
And we have to address stigma, because
yeah,
definitely.
That's the thing, if I don't feel comfortable with talking about something, how am I going to go seek information about it? So totally. Yeah. Mr. Credle, you want to add?
Definitely. Well, we understand that both are urgent issues. On the other hand, we know that we can talk and do what we have to do and chew gum at the same time. In fact, we have no choice. I think we got to do both when we come to dealing with HIV and the pandemic. One of the things that I am reminded about both of these issues is that fear is a major component. Do I wear a condom? Do I wear a mask?
Mm, mm.
And in both instances, death or the potential for death is that fear. Obviously, as you stated, there is more of a stigma to HIV. However, we also know that as people of color, we are more likely to die, whether we are dealing with HIV or whether we're dealing with the COVID. Our likelihood of ultimately passing is more acute. And so the work of all who understand that is to do what we can to mediate that issue, to ensure that, for instance, the vaccines that are available, even now we see that they're not going to the places that it should go to. So all of us have got to get on the bandwagon and make sure that the work is being done to make that happen. And in our communities, particularly the LGBT community, we cannot let people give a pass to move on to COVID and leave HIV behind. They don't deserve that pass. And we have to ensure that the work is being done and that, again, we can talk and chew gum at the same time.
Yes.
So we got to work on both.
So that was a really, really great response. And I thought I was going to ask one question, but I want to jump to another question based on something you just said. With that last part about basically, we have to have some sort of ownership when it comes to this being all of our problems. That's kind of what I heard from what you said. Regardless of where you stand, what you do, we have to, have some sort of a responsibility when it comes to not letting the focus go from HIV to just focusing on COVID. And what do you all think? And I really want to give this back to you, Mr. Credle. What do you think service providers can do in advocating and supporting the communities that they serve here in Newark? And anyone else can take it too, but I want to just start with you since you were just speaking.
I think that we have to make sure that we talk with the community, that we talk with the key leaders in the community and get them engaged in the process as well. That this issue is our issue. And as long as we are committed to working in community as a community, we have to make sure that all elements of the community is involved in that struggle. And it's like when I was asked to be at the table as a veteran, I made sure that not only I represented Black veterans, but I represented other veterans of color when they were not at the table. And when I was working with the LGBTQ community, I became a part of Black and White Men Together. It was created in 1980 to deal with the issue of racism, sexism, and homophobia and HIV/AIDS discrimination in the gay community. And through that work, I grew to understand the importance of being at the table. And I think that as long as we ensure that the people who need to be at the table and are engaged in the issue, and not with some stuff that sidetrack them from the work that needs to be done, then I think we will have success. Otherwise, the demands are clear. We gotta be at the table.
Mhm. Can I weigh in on that? Because it just brings something to mind for me. Is I often think about things through power dynamics, right? Because I just said this the other day, health is political. Science is not, but health is political. And health is, or science should not be political, but health is political because health is very much the outcome or impacted by factors outside of an individual person's control, but the distribution of resources. So diagnoses, health diagnoses are political. And in knowing that, as long as community doesn't have a seat at a table, institutions have unequal power because they have unequal access to resources. And it keeps community stuck in the role of client. And when community is stuck in the role of client, community can't operate in its agency. So we in healthcare, we in public health, we as a hospital, we as an anchor institution, we have to willfully, just to go back to what the dean was saying earlier, what the pandemic did was disallow willful ignorance, because it was willful ignorance happening around inequity and just how stark these disparities were. It was willful apathy, willful ambivalence, but the pandemic disallowed that because it ripped a Band-Aid off, and it did it publicly, and it did it so loud that you couldn't ignore the sound. Right? And so as long as community is only viewed through the lens of client, we don't share power, and that unequal use of power keeps community in a position that it can't fully achieve the fullness of health. And so oftentimes institutions have to learn how to step back and offer others opportunity just to exist in their full agency, right? Without crowding the space and saying, or, you know, I think about this a lot from the angle of research, right? Community has to be co-researcher and not researched upon, because when community is co-researcher, community helps to set the research agenda, community helps to set priorities, then community sees themselves in the solution, and community can trust because trustworthiness has been demonstrated.
Yes. Yes.
Right. Like, I wish there were thousands and thousands of people on this right now listening to this. We are recording this so we can send it to various individuals, right? Okay. I mean, look, health and public health and science has to be with and for people.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
Right? It can't be at people, it can't be top down, you know. And one of the ways that I feel like I've empowered my own self, and this is hard because I saw my parents not do it, is like when I deal with my provider, I take control. My provider works for me, right? And this power dynamic that exists way too often between the healthcare provider and the patient, and even more bigger chasm when we're talking about a white provider and a Black person who's a patient, right? Has to go away. We have to be equal to each other. And you're right, people in the populations, in the community, why do I want to know what it's like? When I first started doing work on aging and HIV, I don't know, 7,000 years ago. When did I start? Like 15 years ago, when the population was starting to age. I didn't know what to study, so I went and talked to people who were aging with HIV. Like, because they knew, and they knew what they were experiencing in their lives, and they knew the drama that they had with their bodies and their hearts and their souls and their minds and everything in their jobs. And so that is really how we have to approach this work, because if we do that, and by the way, also stop looking at what's so wrong and start focusing on what's right, and start building on resilience and strength, nothing is going to change. This is a moment in our history where a lot can change.
Yeah,
That's for sure. And one of the models that we created at Black and White Men Together was co-chair and co-leadership, where you had a white leader as a co-chair and a Black or person of color as co-chair. And then among the boards, it had to be equally divided. And I think that that's a model that we had hoped that other folks in the gay community would adopt as a way of moving forward to ensure that the people who need to be at the table are at the table.
yeah. And that brings me to my next question when it comes to HIV. We know that testing opens the doors to the gates of health because the knowledge of one's status then allows for them to be connected to care. How can we as the community and as providers and just as people who know more than some others resolve the problem in accessing HIV testing when COVID seems to be the main focus, like, of everyone's mind at this time? Like, what do you think we can do to get people to be re-encouraged to want to get tested, to want to know their status, to want to, pay attention to that sector of their well-being? Because I'm sure people, we know people are still having sex. We know people are still,
They're
some
still human, right?
Right.
Yes. We know some people use it to cope. Some people use it as a mirror of some other issues that they may be trying to deal with. So how can we get people to remember that this is a part of that pie chart of health as well?
Okay. Go ahead, Chris.
Right.
Go ahead.
I wanted to use the experience of what we saw in the hospital, let's say just immediately post-surge, right? So if we're looking at June, we're looking at July, people weren't coming to the hospital. People weren't going to their outpatient visits for anything. We had a precipitous drop off in strokes, in heart attacks in our emergency departments. That's not because people suddenly got healthy. That's not because people weren't experiencing these manifestations of disease. They weren't coming to healthcare settings for the disease. So, and now we're seeing as just a wave, even with later stage diagnosis of cancers, right? Because people were missing critical screenings at a point in the pandemic because of what, going back to what Mr. Credle said about fear. Fear around the pandemic paralyzed us in many ways, and fear really impacts health-seeking behavior. And what is the role of systems and institutions to help remove some of that fears? Like, for instance, I'll use myself as an example. I have a certain amount of privilege that I bring to the table too. And I was just thinking about this on my car ride because of a conversation I had with someone, privilege associated, well educated, but earning a certain amount, being Christian, being heterosexual, straight, right? There's privilege associated with that. So I have to understand that privilege that I bring to the table. But I was diagnosed with a health condition that caused me to have to withdraw from my training. And I was so scared that I would not be able to go back because I wasn't sure what would I do with myself if I could not be the doctor I imagined to be. And how would I take care of myself? How would I navigate the world without that purpose or that credentialing, right? So the thing that it was most finite for me, yes, I had to learn more about myself. I had to learn about my skills, and then I got better, and I segued into public health and re-enter my training. But I was without insurance for a while. This is prior to Obamacare. I couldn't afford it. After I paid for my COBRA as long as I could afford it, I couldn't afford healthcare anymore, and I didn't have insurance. And because I didn't have insurance, my health-seeking behavior changed because of fear, the fear of cost, the fear of price. I fell off of a stage. I suffered a concussion. I was pinned underneath a stage and my knee was twisted. And I mustered the strength to say, whatever you do, don't take me to the hospital. And people were like, what, Dr. Pernell? I said, I can't afford it. I can't afford it. I had a certain amount of literacy, right? I was a physician. I just withdrew from training, so I knew something about the human body. And I use that example to say what happened during the pandemic. Fear paralyzed communities, and where health-seeking behavior was already fraught because of implicit biases, because of systemic racism, and because of how a lack of access impacted certain groups disproportionately. The pandemic highlighted that. It put it on steroids. So you have a time where people are at home sick and are finding other ways to mitigate illness. And we in university hospital had to purposefully message it why it's safe to come back to the hospital. We had to purposely think through ways to take care into community more deeply, right? And so I think that's what we have to do so that other health conditions don't get lost in the glare of a pandemic. Yes, we've lost 485,000 plus lives, my father being one of them, 2 cousins being one of them, my sister being a long hauler.
My grandfather being one of them.
That say their names, speak their names, Dr. Susan Moore being one of them. The host of university hospital employees being one of them. But we have to increase literacy and understanding around health so that people can be in a position to exercise their power. We have to do that intentionally. I say all of that to say we have to do that intentionally, because we at University Hospital had to intentionally message it was safe to come back in, and we had to intentionally demonstrate that we could bring care service closest to where you were, and we had to intentionally ensure that telehealth wasn't creating another false divide or false barrier to access.
Thank you.
If I could just add really quickly to Chris, what Chris said is like, okay, so first and foremost, we all know that health is part of us. Health is it's endemic. There's one health problem, there's multiple health problems. You show me a mental health problem, I'll show you addiction. You show me addiction, I'll show you HIV risk. But these things don't happen in isolation, but we somehow have, like, collectively as a society, inability to focus on more than one thing at a time. And I don't know why. The last trip I went on, which was in September of 2019, the last time I was on a plane, I went to China, and I was there, and we went to a very small town outside in kind of like I want to say like the suburbs of one of the main cities in China. And there was this amazing health fair where they were doing all these things like body weight and cigarette smoking, diabetes, and like all of this stuff. They realize that people are these complex, and mental health, complex organisms with all these health issues. Like, here's like a duh idea. And like, maybe I'm just like dumb and I'm just gonna say it. Like, why can't we test people for HIV when they're getting their COVID vaccine? Like, why not? That seems like maybe an opportunity where somebody's engaged, sitting there for 15 minutes, where you can say, okay, so I'm gonna do this little shot in your arm, and I'm gonna do a little HIV test for a second. Let me just prick your finger here. You're gonna have to hang out for 15 minutes anyway. So let's do 2 for 1. Mm-hmm. That's the thinking I think healthcare needs to start espousing.
Yeah. And what do you think, I just wanted to continue with you, Dean Halkitis, as far as the status neutral approach. What do you think about, how does a person maintain status neutrality while balancing compassion for someone who has a strong emotional reaction to their HIV test result?
Yeah, I mean,
I think we can't even say like, oh, we're just going to do this HIV test. Some people don't even want to talk about it.
No, that's right. Mm-hmm. Look, I mean, I think the whole beauty of the status neutral approach is that it breaks the schism in the population, right? So the pos, the negs, the unknowns, right? The unknowns are over there, but this artificial dichotomy that has existed for such a long time, that I've known ever since 1981, that has just precipitated the epidemic in every population. I like the idea because it doesn't say to people you can't be proud to be positive. I think there are a lot of people who are incredibly and should be proud to be positive and living and thriving. But for some people, it's less important, right? By doing this status neutral approach, what I think we do is we say, look, you come in, you test, you're positive, you go on meds, you're negative, you go on meds, right? There's no difference, right? We don't see a difference. And I think that that is a really powerful message for people to be able to destigmatize HIV. To Chris, one more point to Chris's comments, which is, we also have to make people aware that HIV still exists.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I don't think, when I tell my students, oh, there's like 40,000, 50,000 new infections a year, they're like, what? Where? In Africa? I'm like, no, in the United States. right? And they're like amazed. And because it's not in the news every night, we're not covering it. They're like, there's a cure now, right? I'm like, no, there's not a cure now. So we have our work to do to re-educate around HIV also.
Yeah. Mr. Credle, you want to say?
Yeah, just that I think the center of that dialogue has to be around the idea of family, that we are part of a Black family in crisis when it comes to health. And that as family members, we really need to be aware that our hope, our salvation, our responsibility is to be there for each other.
Mhm.
And that we can't buy into this notion of because you are working in the cotton fields and others are in the house that you still are slaves.
Mhm.
That those differences doesn't change your status, but you can change your status by recognizing that as family, no matter where you come from, you still are family. And that how you live, how you strive, how you become impacts the family. And I think if we hold on to the notion of family and really push that issue, I think we can cut through a lot of the barriers that exist. That all of this is about making, getting the family, the Black family more healthy,
Yeah.
regardless of what condition or what health issue are being faced.
Yes.
I really like that. I really, really like that. And when you say family, it kind of makes me think about us at Research with the Heart and how we've done a lot of work to make all of our participants and the community feel like we're a family. So much so that it was hard for us to adjust to the pandemic because we're so used to participants and community members dropping by our space because it's deemed as a safe space, and them feeling like, okay, if I don't have anywhere to go, I'm not necessarily going to tell them that I'm on the streets, but let me come see them, and they're going to give me some snacks, and they're going to give me condoms, and they're going to acknowledge me and make me feel good about whatever it is that I'm going through. And I think that people need to be validated in what they're going through. And even if you don't know what they're going through, you need to treat them like that. And I think that because a lot of providers and clinical spaces, they don't do that, it's made it that much harder for us to explain COVID-19 to the Black and Brown communities and to explain why vaccines are important and why we're doing this. And it's kind of allowed that in social media for these other narratives to get in front of the work that we have yet to do or we're trying to do, but we're in a weird position when it comes to that. And I wanted to ask.
But let me just say one other thing is the key part of that, however, is that we cannot allow the traditional definition of family be what we see.
Mhm.
We got to see family within the larger context, because oftentimes for us, it's the other people in our lives that are family and not necessarily the biological family. So we got to make sure that we define family in the broadest sense that we can.
Yeah, you got to make it clear. You have
Yeah.
to make it clear. I wanted to ask all of you, we know that medical mistrust and perceptions of vaccines is a thing we have to talk about. And just all of you watching, get your questions ready. I'm trying to move through mine. I'm almost done with them. So we'll be able to answer some of yours. So get them ready, drop them in the chat. But we have to talk about this because we are still living with, in this pandemic, and we are still trying to get people the proper information on vaccines. So with that, we know that the medical mistrust and perceptions of vaccine development can deter people from getting vaccinated. We see that. how have you been able to communicate with people who are skeptical about vaccines? And I'm going to act like I don't know what some of you do, and you can just answer that.
I'll start. So I had someone challenge the terminology that we use. And ever since they have, I've been so thankful. And she said, it's not so much that Black and brown folks are vaccine hesitant, is that they're historically aware. And a part of validating their learned behavior and how they've rationalized their behavior is because they're keenly aware of the history. They're keenly aware of the historical injustices and keenly aware of how the system perpetuates ongoing disparities, right? And so if you understand that where a person is coming from, I'm going to go back to the V word, you validate. So what I've learned to do a lot, Jamir, is I have to start from a place of validation. You know, I believe in the science. I'm a public health physician. I talk about my dad being a research scientist. He raised me on follow the data, follow the science, just like he raised me on Black power, just like he raised me on Black excellence. All of those things were commensurate in one. But I have to validate where people start, right? Because there has been a collective trauma because of medical apartheid. There has been a collective trauma because of medical experimentation and exploitation. And that trauma is ongoing when you see a Black woman physician in Indiana resorting to social media to try to save her life. Right? And says, I'm not getting appropriate care. I have coronavirus, and the hospital, though I am a physician, is treating me differently. And so I start with validation and understanding that people are historically aware. I also am encouraged that a lot of folks in the Black and brown community are in, especially around this vaccine in particular, and I believe this is true more broadly, are in this wait and see, this persuadable, this very fluid group, okay? So the Kaiser Family Foundation did a poll and they published it about the end of January, and I've just been feasting off of it because I want people to reframe the narrative when we're talking about Black and brown folks, especially with this vaccine. If you look at the numbers, though everyone has made movement from December to January on willingness to get vaccinated, on I've already received one dose, we see a sharp increase. What really stood out for me is that 43% of Black respondents were in the wait and see category. They were the highest group in the wait and see category, followed by the Latinx community. They were equally in a high group as 18 to 29-year-olds and those who live in urban environments. Black and browns were not higher in definitely no, but you would be led to think by the vaccine hesitancy narrative that Blacks are in this definitely no. They're not. They're in this wait and see. So we need to understand what people's information needs are. We need to understand the social and cultural fluency that is necessary to have these conversations. We need to understand the messengers, the narratives that impact people along, and this is a term that I've been using, decision journey. People are at different points of that decision journey. And I very rarely will allow myself to be in a position where people think I'm there to convince them to get vaccinated. Look, I participated in a clinical trial around the coronavirus vaccine. So I definitely believe in the science. So I can't have people think I'm there to convince. No, I'm there to help you in your decision journey. I want to make sure you are equipped with accurate information, literate information, socially and culturally fluent information, so you can be in a position and check this, working with some folks or consulting with the state to move from awareness to motivation, to intention, to taking an action, to follow through. And this is about getting people safe and keeping people safe. So I've started to hopefully in my communications, and I check myself to come from that place. And I think the more that we do that, you'll see Black and browns in that wait and see category migrate to I'm ready to take an action.
I think Chris is right. I think that we are going to, I'm not worried about the Black and brown community, ultimately the population. I think ultimately there will be an uptake of the vaccine. I think there's this because the vaccine hesitancy appears in other segments of the population too, but there's going to be a segment of this American population of people who have been historically against vaccines, who do not vaccinate their children, who are not going to get vaccinated. And I think that has nothing to do with medical mistrust. And I think that African-American population has every right to distrust healthcare for like 1,000,001 reasons. The reason that this other group is distrusting is based on just bad understanding of science.
Yeah, disinformation.
And I don't know how you change that. Like, how do you convince someone like, no, that's wrong? Because if you're not willing to be, as Chris said, in an intention, a pre-contemplative versus an action stage or something, you're not gonna be just stuck in this one spot. So look, we have to just get 70% of the people in our country vaccinated. We'll get there. I think we will get there.
And can I just say one quick thing to that? What made me think about Black people played an outsized, even heroic role in saving this republic. Okay, I'm going to say it that way. And when given the information and we understand the odds and the stakes, we're able to take dramatic actions.
That's right.
Always. I agree with you. That's wonderful. Yes.
Always.
And Chris, what I think about is people like you being in the forefront of this. I mean, there are a lot of women in particular that have been recognized for their work on the vaccine. And they need to be highlighted. They need to be given the medals, all of those kinds of things to draw attention. Because, when Black folks see themselves, in the picture, then they don't have any more questions about, should I join that picture? Mm-hmm. It's all right. It's safe there. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's what's needed right now, is we really need to highlight the experiences of people who have dedicated their lives to this work and came out victorious by creating this vaccine. And I think that would be one of the major ways of getting. But as you said before, we have to acknowledge the disparities, but we have to also understand that a lot of that was in the past. This is not the concept of Black people being guinea pigs. That was in the past. Now we have a new day. Yeah. And we gotta, again, let's do it for the family if we don't do it for ourselves.
Yep, let's validate, let's talk and have these type of conversations around HIV and COVID and what's hindered. Social media has played a huge part. I believe that if we were 15 years ago, we wouldn't be dealing with a lot of the things that we have to deal with because everyone is a doctor if they have a Facebook account or a scientist. If they, some people share things and then it's law. So I think that that's hindered us a great deal. But I wanted to shift because I really want to jump into the questions in the chat. So I wanted to shift and go to you, Dean Halkitis, and ask, and really just say and ask, could you believe that we have seen a development of an HIV vaccine study drug reach phase 3? And how incredible that is, given that the Mosaico study, which is a phase 3 HIV vaccine study that we're currently recruiting for at our site in Newark, is being done in Newark, in a place where it's so divided and, people are so, underserved and just, ignorant to the resources and the level of access that really lives in their backyard. How do you think something like this can change the landscape of HIV prevention and abroad? And I want to start with you, but everyone can take it.
Yeah. So, and I want to answer a question that Janet raised. But let me say that I think that so the vaccine to me is like in some ways the way I see PrEP, and U equals U, which is about empowerment, taking control of one's life and taking control of one's health. That with PrEP we added another tool to the arsenal. And I think that what I would like the message to be to people who are living out there who could be potentially members of this trial is that your involvement in a trial to develop an HIV vaccine, which I think we'll get to relatively short amount of time, right, will transform how this disease exists in our country. You have the possibility to change it. right? And so it would be nice that we don't have one more infection in this country at some point in the near future. So there is great hope, I think, because that'll be another tool in the arsenal, right? I do want to ask, though, go to Janet's question, though, which is how does being HIV positive interact with COVID? Which is a really complicated question and a really important question. So like early in the epidemic, people were like, oh, positive people are going to get sick and die at higher rates in the general population. And we didn't really see that. It really manifests that way, right? And so for a while there was some conversation, including with people like me saying, maybe there's some protection there. Maybe there's some kind of protection from immune dysregulation. Maybe there's some kind of protection from like the medications. But I know based on my conversations with my friend Shobha Swaminathan that there are manifestations of disease like a thrombocytic purpura, which are manifesting in people who are living with HIV because of the cytokine storms that are happening. So if you are HIV positive and you are on this and you are living through this pandemic, here's what you need to do. You continue to take your meds, you continue to monitor your health, and the minute something seems off to you, you get with your doctor.
Absolutely.
Here, here.
Right on.
He said it.
Yeah. Okay. So we can move on. I'll jump to the next question in the chat from Christy Lynn. How can we mobilize the vast and comprehensive public health community to utilize the theoretical frameworks of behavior change to assist with messaging, campaigns, and more importantly, meeting people where they are? How can we as academic and healthcare community leverage the extensive resources, people included, to conduct needs assessments and systematically disseminate the information back to the communities? That was a loaded question. Anyone can take it.
Thank you, Christy Lynn. I'll start because this is a part of what I found fascinating in the Kaiser Family Foundation poll and others, and I've been writing about it and I've been thinking about it. So several public health entities, the Beaumont Foundation, are really looking at messaging. What should we message? How should we message around the pandemic? And what influences a decision to either follow a public health guideline or to get vaccinated in this instance? And in that poll, when you looked at people who were enthusiastic about the vaccine, it was important for them to know someone in their circle that had been vaccinated. So how are we amplifying the experiences of those in Black and Brown communities who have been vaccinated? Just like Mr. Credle said, we have to be able to speak the name of Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, the Black woman scientist at the NIH who co-led the study team that designed the Moderna mRNA vaccine. We also have to amplify the messages of Black folks in family, and not just biological family, in community, who have had the experience of being vaccinated and can talk about it through their own terms, their own language, and they have value. So that's one thing. Another thing that we learned is that people who are in that stage where, you know, they're teeter-tottering from motivation to intention, they need barriers removed to help them solidify their intention. So understanding what those barriers are and not only removing the barriers, but messaging around the removal of those barriers, right? So for instance, as we give you an example, in the poll that I'm talking about, people who were willing to get vaccinated said the messages that resonated with them, and this was true across racial ethnic groups, is hearing that the vaccine was going to stop them from getting sick. Like, I don't want to get sick. So we can talk about 95% efficacy, 94.1% efficacy. Is it going to stop me from getting sick? Right? Would it allow my life to go back to normal, whatever normal is? You know, I find that word to be a little bit problematic because that baseline normal is an inherently racist, sexist, Islamophobic, homophobic society, but they can go back to what it was. People needed to hear that the side effects weren't going to harm them, and they wanted information around long-term impact. And so that's where we have the least amount of information. So messaging around those other three areas by folks in your community or family circle, and then using that to accumulate evidence. That's the evidence that people want. That's the evidence. And so we have to be intentional. So what we're doing, even at University Hospital, we did rounding with our staff to understand who was willing to get vaccinated, who might not be willing, and what are your needs around that decision or choice. Do you want more information? How do you want that information? Do you want to hear from others who have been vaccinated? So there are anecdotal stories to show what is emerging from the data. Yeah, that's it. So that's just a little bit.
I would also add that I like, yeah, amazing. And I would like to add that I think that I've spent way too much time in the last few weeks or months on doing these news shows on NJ12 and stuff. Not because I'm a narcissist, I'm a little bit of a narcissist, but mostly because I feel like going out and giving the message in that way is what matters, right? And so when you have somebody in your life you trust who's taking the vaccine, you're going to be more likely to take the vaccine. So I feel like that's sort of what I have to do here. And it's the same issues that we're facing with the vaccine we face with PrEP. In our studies, time after time after time after, young men say to us, I'm not on PrEP because I don't know if it fully protects me, right? And and I'm worried about the side effects. And how different is that from the vaccine? Not so different at all. Right?
Not so different.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We're getting better at understanding people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think we've not wanted to understand people.
Right.
We're taking the time to do so. Taking the time to really understand people, because it takes time and investment. I've been in this particular field of research around HIV and now COVID for almost 4 years. And when I look back on how much we've done when it comes to events, supporting, showing up to protests and rallies for, violence against transgender women and, doing self-defense classes. We've done so much. And a lot of those things they didn't result in people banging down the door like, oh, we want to be in the study and we want to be a part of what you're doing. A lot of that was just to get people to trust us enough to listen to us. And a lot of people would say, oh, we can't spend thousands of dollars for these events and we can't do this and we can't do that. But, the team that we have and the leadership that we have, which is women leading us and doing what they got to do to, allow us to take risks and utilize our creative minds and, being of the community and understanding that I've never been able to walk up to someone that I've never met, that has never met me, that's never seen me or know what I do and say, hey, you want to be in an HIV prevention trial? Like, I can't do that. Like, right. I can't even really speak to that person if I'm in Newark on Broad Street because I don't know what's going to happen. So, I've had to learn, like, you have to relate to people. You have to see and be able to look in their eyes and understand that they've had a rough day because they just lost a person who was getting the SSI check in their household to maintain the rent that they're behind on. Yeah. So they're now stressed out because the sex work that they was doing was just to really feed their drug habit and to get them something to eat and some weed. But now they're not going to have anywhere to live. And there's a whole nother brigade of problems that they're dealing with. They don't want to talk to you about PrEP. They don't want to talk to you about a study. You have to, really be able to understand that. We have another.
Well, let me say that what I think about in terms of this question is two major things. The first is empathy.
Big word.
Yeah. Having empathy for other people in terms of where they're coming from. But then remind people that Black lives matter. People from all over the world was marching because of something that happened not in their own community, because many of them didn't have Black folks in their community, but something that happened here. And they were marching to say to the world and to others and to America that Black lives matter. And if you catch that in any kind of way, then your life matters. And that's what we're talking about, making your life matter. And all you have to do is to step in that space, because there are people out there who want to give you what you need in order to move forward with your life.
Very well said. Very well said. Someone, Patsy H dropped in the chat. It was mentioned that bringing people to the table is important. Are there concerns/worries that you may not be bringing everyone or missing people?
We're missing people now.
Yeah, I'm saying always.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that sometimes there are people at the table that don't belong there, and
Right.
we're afraid to talk about it. We're afraid to.
No, we need to say, but this is the thing, and this is the thing that you said, Jamir. Like, I don't think we're not going back. Like, we're done, right? Like there's this idea that somehow people have that we're going to go back to what was "quote unquote" normal,
Right.
which was horrendous, is
Thank you.
over, right?
Right.
There's none of us have gone through this year unchanged. Like,
Right.
for example, I will now, for the first time in my life, admit that I will go to a Taylor Swift concert because of the 2 albums she dropped. I am changed because of COVID, because of the 2 albums that she created. All right? That's a silly example, but
Like, you've been in the house for a long time.
I know, but now I want to go. But do you think we're going to go to concerts in the future and we're not going to have our temperature taken?
Yeah.
Everybody, so let's stop it. Let's just say things are going to change, and hopefully for the better in terms of equity, but also in terms of the health behaviors and the health systems we enact.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we have to adapt to that family motto that Mr. Credle's talked about. If we don't feel together, comfortable being together and trusting one another, then we'll be doing this work in vain. We'll be having these conversations, and people will be more willing to listen to, people pretend to be physicians because they put on white coats and talk about what the vaccine is doing to them, versus being able to allow themselves to accept the information from people who are on the front lines and are doing the work and have been doing the work. So they understand and they get it. So
it's so important that messaging
really
stuff. Like the amount of time I spent on the phone with my 75-year-old Greek aunt, to explain to her what's an antibody, what's a virus, blah, blah, blah. Do you know why? Because she's got dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of other old Greek ladies.
Others that are friends, right?
Right, exactly.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, that's more public health that I do than I'm actually deaning a school.
Right.
Yeah. That's why I agree
and
with you and everything. That's why I'll talk to whomever I can talk to and literally have a conversation with, because I know they represent another community. They have access to a community that I don't have access to. They are an asset or a value in a community that I'm an unknown commodity. I may not have that same asset or value. If this pandemic has focused us, I think it has also focused us on the need for social connectedness. The lack of social connectivity kills. We know that isolation kills. And so that social connectedness can only happen on a platform of understanding of a human-centered approach. You've got to see the human being across the table from you, the dignity in that life. That's an imperative. Without that, we can't achieve whole populations.
Yeah. And I wanted to just say, as we are nearing our last 15 minutes of this wonderful conversation, thank you to everyone who decided to join us tonight. This is a celebration of National Black HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. This is a necessary conversation with some necessary individuals on our panel. I wanted to ask my last question that I have for you all, and that's really, there are times where we forget to celebrate our wins. And Dr. Halkitis talked about this earlier. When we're engulfed in so many challenges like we are during this pandemic, what has been a win this year for communities most impacted by HIV and COVID? Because I think it's necessary to talk about the good along with the bad.
That we get to vote in a more equitable way. I think we can never go back to the way we voted before. I don't think no one will ever go. I know that they will want us to go back, but we can't.
We can't.
We can't. And that's a huge win for our country, because 150 million people voted, 160, right? That's a huge win for us as a society.
Yeah.
Right. Here, and if I could add to that, I think science won. Like I smile because science won, you know, and science can benefit all of humanity. When we remove those political systems that seek to manipulate information or seek to manipulate knowledge or seek to manipulate the application of science, science won. And in communities where we have been saddled with, vulnerabilities, marginalization, we're historically excluded, we need to have full access to the power of science. And science won and is winning. And just one more personal note, my dad was hospitalized for something unrelated to COVID. My dad really was a bionic man. And so, he was surviving in stage lymphoma. He had made up his mind, I'm not doing any more treatments for it because that's killing me. I'm just going to live out the home stretch of my life, whatever that is. And so, we were part of that plan, and, getting him into rehab just to get him strong enough to get back to his baseline and get back on his couch at the house. And he got a line infection, and going back into the hospital, one of the conversations we had during the time when my father was sick before the restrictions, we were talking about where we were at the cusp with the HIV vaccine and the phase of that the trials were in, and how he was saying how I can't believe it, but I can, because of what he had witnessed through his own illness, his own chronic infection, right? I saw my father go through wasting before. My father took 10 years to openly tell his own family he had HIV. 10 years.
Yes.
I saw him waste. He went through physical wasting. So it was because of clinical research and science. This man is plotting out his T cells, taking him back to his appointments. What are we trying now, doc, to get to the point that the viral load could become so suppressed that it's undetectable? But and him being able to speak to me, that was prophetic in so many ways. He was like, it's so exciting. If I could have been a part of that, I would have loved to be a part of that legacy, what's about to happen. And then COVID hits. And so that a lot of that went into my decision. I was like, I have to be a part of this trial.
You're doing it. You're doing it. He's a part of it. He's in you.
Right?
You're doing it.
Right. And that's what I said. I was like, look, I'm a data point, Daddy. I'm a data point. I'm the data.
You're doing it.
I'm a data point. And I think, those stories in our community, those are empowering stories. This thing didn't just sit and rot on us. We are also a part of the solution.
It's a win. It's still a win. It's still a win.
It's a win.
Mr. Credle, I know you wanted to jump in.
It's just that as I was saying before, I think that Black Lives Matters, that we continue that throughout this pandemic. It's amazing. And I think there's real hope now that Joe and Kamala have taken a lead role in our nation. There's real hope.
Kamala, I just love to think about, a woman of color in such a prestigious role, and doing something that, yet again, women were told they couldn't do, especially women of color. So I really love that. And yes, this is being recorded, and we will be sending this out to everyone so that you can send this all to everyone for Christmas, for their birthday, for whatever reason you want to send this to them. This is an extremely important conversation. I just wanted to say in the last 10 minutes, thank you, all of our lovely panelists, for being willing to take this on and have such an important conversation with us in celebration of National Black HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. I wanted to also thank ArtFront Galleries and Raphael for all the wonderful things he's done for the virtual art show. If you have not checked it out, check it out. Neutral Nation artshow.com. And there's also a lot of opportunities to be a part of what we're doing at Research with the Heart. We are hosting a plethora of COVID-19 trials, one being the COMPASS study. We are still following participants on the Moderna trial. We are so proud to have been a part of that and be able to bring that to Newark. And we are doing a lot of HIV work because we're never going to stop doing the HIV work that we've done for the last 15 years. That's still the #1 priority for us. That's why we're so tired, because we are trying to balance these things, because we don't want our current participants, future participants, or community members to think that we've left them. Because, you know, people take things personal when they feel like they know you and they trust you and you earn that space, you know, in that place with them. And we want people to know that we're still fighting. That's why this Mosaico study is really important. So you're going to see us continuously post about this, because just like our Give Prep a Shot 083 study, when I started here, it started. And, you know, it was really incredible for me to witness that the cabotegravir injection shot was proven to be just as effective as daily oral Truvada. So, you know, that's something that is a win during the pandemic. We weren't able to celebrate it. We weren't able to, you know, go parade in the street and scream and holler. But that's something that we're so proud of, because we were a part of that. And we need people who are from Newark and beyond in New Jersey to understand that they're a part of this. If we're doing it, you're doing it. Because like Mr. Credle said, we're a family, we're together. And I just want to say thank you so much to Travis. He worked really, really, really hard to put this together, especially in my absence, and Andrew and to the rest of our team who worked hard to put this together. And I wanted to send a special shout out to my grandfather, who I lost due to COVID, and he was a Marine veteran. He was a Bell Atlantic worker when they were still Bell Atlantic, and he retired with a full pension and went and got a whole nother career as a postal worker, as a mailman. And he did that for 30 something years. So, you know, I'm really just proud to be able to have these conversations and to wear his chain around my neck to symbolize legacy and continuing to do the work that our ancestors, you know, never even dreamed of. So, panelists, would you like to say anything else? Just let everybody know how they can reach you, how they can contact you, and just say your goodbyes.
Mr. Credle, will you go first?
Oh, you want me to go first?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I can be contacted through the Newark Pride Alliance Circle of Friends. Our website will be up soon, and I'll be doing work through there. And watch for the next Fireball. It's going to be quite interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I want to do what Chris did.
Yeah. So I'll talk about how you can reach us through University Hospital, and how you can reach me too. So, you know, at University Hospital, we're reimagining daily what it looks like to partner with community, to live with community, beside community. So we have a community at uhnj.org. If you're interested in any of the events that we do in community, any of the virtual offerings that we have right now, you know, we're also on our social media pages, on Twitter, University Hospital, University Hospital Newark on Instagram. And, you know, there are multiple voices at University Hospital on the front lines, advocating, fighting, uplifting the cause of health justice and health equity for the Newark community and more broadly, and even for the state. And you can also find me out there on social media at Dr. Chris MD. I'm out there on Twitter, and I'm always trying to, you know, put forth accurate, helpful, socially and culturally fluent knowledge and information.
And on CNN.
Yes.
Period.
All right.
And yeah, I mean, you can find me here in Newark, near my home, which I love very, very much. I'm so glad I live here in the middle of all of this. You know, it makes me really happy. But you know, certainly on you know our research center, www.chips.org. That's CHIBPS.org. You know, I'm also on social media, Dean PN Halkitis, and just you know, Google. We are always happy to talk to you about the great work we're doing with the University Hospital and with NJMS and you know the community, and just you know, let's keep fighting the fight, right? Because this is not the time to let our guard down.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for attending the Neutral Nation panel discussion. You will all receive an email. Give us a day, give us some time to let it load up. You will all be receiving this in an email to thank you for your attendance, along with the link to view this recording to be shared with your networks. Thank you all so much. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Make sure you follow us on all social media platforms, Research with the Heart and RWAH-Newark on Twitter. And, you know, we just look forward to seeing you next time. We have the last installment program, which will be our voices, our stories, hosted by the Queer Newark Oral History Project. You can find more information about that on the neutralnationartshow.com website. I am your moderator for this evening, and I thank you and have a great night. And I'm gonna can we all do a high five?
Yeah.
Bam, bam, bam. All right, y'all. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Bye-bye.